Hey guys, this is Collin Moshman for CardRunners.com. The theme of today's quickie is going to be pre-flop hand quiz. So we're going to look at hands from my own games, some 9-mans, MTT SNGs, and all types of SNGs, and you guys are going to tell me what the correct range is and the correct play with their hand. So first we're at the final table of a $15 180 man, and a reg open shoves on the button. The question here is, what is our calling range in the big blind? So think about the answer to that question and whether we should call it off here. I'm going to pull this up in the Hold'em Racers Nash calculator, and this is a very clear call from CEV mode. So if this were, for example, an MTT, we would absolutely have to call it off here. But is it still a call at a 180-man final table with ICM? And so what we're going to see here is that when the button shoves, we do call it off in Nash down to ace-8 offsuit, which is showing up as pretty break even. So calling is definitely reasonable, and I do call in game, but there is one thing to notice, which is that this is predicated on him shoving the top 50%. And against a reg who does not have particularly lag stats, it's a little bit dubious that he's going to be shoving some of these hands, like for example 6-4 suited and Jack-3 suited. So if we tighten it up a little bit, let's say for example we go to the low 40s, which is still a very wide range, then ace-8 off should go from break even to a loss. In fact, sure enough, it does. So while this is a Nash call and certainly isn't crazy, I think against his actual shoving range it is slightly minus EV. In our next hand, we're going to look at a 9-man spot where we have a 12 blind effective stack in the hijack. And one of the key things in spots like this when coming up with your shoving range is adjusting for the antes. And the antes are going to significantly widen our shoving range in a spot like this. So one thing that is going to be a pretty general rule of thumb is that a lot of the time in a 9-man and MTT SNGs with a stack of close to 10 blinds, we're going to be correct to shove most or all pairs, suited aces, suited Broadway hands, and associated hands like Queen Jack offsuit. So we pull this hand up and we have our shoving range that ace-2 suited is in fact at the bottom of that range. And in game, I actually make an incorrect fold. I'm not sure if this is a misclick. I didn't process the information correctly, but definitely a profitable shove with all suited aces, pairs, and suited Broadway hands. In our next hand, we're back in a 180 man, and this is before the final table. 5 blind shove, we're playing to happily stack off in the small blind. 6.5 blind shove, we're still playing to happily stack off. And then we get additional multi-way component when the button puts in his 10 blinds as well. Now multi-way spots can be difficult to analyze, and the big thing that I always like to do in spots like this is look at the player on the tightest range and see how we do against him as a starting point. And here that player is going to be the button, the third one to put in chips. He's also the only one somewhat deep with the blinds, so he's definitely going to be the one likely on the tightest range. So his range here we might assume to be approximately 6s, ace-jack, ace-10 suited, king-queen suited, and against that range we actually have less than 50% equity. But with that said, we should still put it in here for a couple of reasons. One is that there's nice overlay. There's overlay of about 2400 from the blinds and antes, in fact exactly 2400, and also these players are likely to be on wider ranges. So in the main pot for the majority of the money, we actually have decent equity in this multi-way situation. So for those reasons, I believe we're correct to stack off here with the ace-queen suited. And not to be results oriented, but we'll take a look at the showdown in some of these hands to maybe get some interesting information. So this is how this one showed down.